The airport was unusually bright that morning, sunlight pouring through the massive glass panels as if the world wanted to pretend everything was fine. But inside Alexander Reed, the CEO known for billion-dollar deals, ruthless decisions, and a life lived in penthouse isolation, there was a silence darker than any storm. He stood in the middle of the bustling terminal, dressed in a perfect black suit that made him look unbreakable, but the truth was hidden beneath the fabric. He had just buried the last person who ever truly knew him, his mother. And now he was flying home alone to an empty penthouse that echoed with the absence of a childhood he never got to heal. He had money, power, status, yet in that moment, surrounded by thousands of strangers, he felt like the most lost person on earth. And that was when a tiny hand tugged at his sleeve, and a soft voice asked the question that shattered his walls, "Are you lost too, mister?" Before the story continues, if you believe in kindness, human connection, and second chances, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to the Kindness Thread channel. Your support brings more heart-touching stories to life. Alexander froze. He hadn't heard a child speak to him in years. He slowly turned, expecting to see a parent behind her, but the little girl stood alone, bundled in a red coat, a tiny green backpack shaped like a cat resting on her shoulders, and wide blue eyes that held no fear, only innocent curiosity. The terminal roared around them with rolling suitcases, distant announcements, hurried footsteps, and muffled conversations, yet somehow the space between them felt still, almost sacred. He wanted to say he wasn't lost. He wanted to say he knew exactly where he was going. But the words died on his tongue. Because for the first time, he realized he didn't know anymore. The little girl looked up at him with such genuine trust that something inside him cracked open, flooding him with a strange warmth he couldn't name. As he sat on the bench near gate 14, the little girl shuffled closer, her tiny boots tapping against the floor. She wasn't afraid of him, not even a little. She held a half-eaten cookie in her mittened hand, and to his disbelief, she offered it to him as if sharing with an old friend. No one had offered him something without expecting anything in return for as long as he could remember. He didn't take the cookie, but he felt his throat tighten at the gesture. He noticed that she kept glancing around, occasionally waving at passing travelers who smiled at her. Alexander followed her gaze and realized her parents weren't nearby. His heartbeat quickened. The thought of such a small child being alone in a crowded airport unsettled him more than any corporate crisis ever had. He shifted his posture, sitting straighter, suddenly more alert, more protective than he had felt in years. As minutes passed, he tried to understand why fate had placed this child in front of him on the loneliest morning of his life. The girl seemed to sense his sadness in a way adults never could. She pointed at the sky through the long airport windows, murmuring in a soft, hopeful tone, as if reminding him that some things, sunlight, warmth, new beginnings, were still free, still available to anyone willing to look up. Watching her, he felt something unfamiliar rise in his chest, something that made his eyes sting. He blinked it away quickly. CEOs didn't cry, not in public, not anywhere. But the truth was undeniable. This child, without even knowing his name, had reached a part of his heart no one had touched in decades. When an announcement echoed through the terminal, the little girl suddenly looked nervous. She reached for Alexander's hand, trusting him completely. The shock of that tiny hand gripping his large one stirred an emotion he had long buried, the instinct to care, to protect, to choose someone else over himself. He gently squeezed her hand back, feeling a warmth that spread through his veins. He looked around for airport security but found Northwest One immediately close. Instead, he noticed a woman appearing frantically from the opposite corner, scanning every face, panic etched into her features. She must be the mother. The realization brought both relief and a surprising wave of disappointment. As the woman rushed toward them, tears streaking her cheeks, the little girl brightened and ran into her arms, but not before turning back to Alexander with a smile that could melt stone. The mother thanked him repeatedly, breathless with gratitude, explaining that she had turned for only a moment to check their tickets, and her daughter had wandered off. Alexander nodded, assuring her everything was fine. But something deep inside him shifted. Watching the two embrace, the mother trembling with relief, the little girl giggling softly, he felt a longing so sharp it stole his breath. He had spent years believing he didn't need anyone. Believing connection only brought pain. Believing loneliness was safer. But now, watching pure love in its simplest form, he realized how wrong he had been. The mother prepared to leave, holding her daughter close, but the little girl reached for Alexander one last time, tapping her small finger over her own heart, as if telling him something important in the only way she knew how. He felt the message even without words. After they walked away, Alexander sat in silence, staring at his hands. Hands that had signed mergers worth billions. Hands that had built an empire. Yet those same hands had never held anything as gentle as trust from a child. He leaned back on the cold airport bench, overwhelmed by a storm of thoughts. He remembered his mother's final moments, the way she wished he would slow down, find love, live a life that wasn't measured in profits. He had brushed off her words, promising he would try someday. Now, sitting alone again, he realized someday had to start now. That tiny girl had unknowingly delivered the message his heart needed to hear. He wasn't living, he was merely existing. When boarding began, Alexander didn't stand. For the first time in years, he canceled his flight. Not out of fear, but out of clarity. He wasn't going back to an empty penthouse. Not today. Instead, he stepped outside into the bright daylight, feeling the warm sun hit his face. He breathed deeply, noticing the world around him in a way he never had. He booked a ticket for another city, one he had always wanted to visit but never had the time for. He called his assistant and told him he'd be unreachable for a week. And then he did something even braver. He called his estranged sister, someone he had pushed away for years, and asked if they could talk. That little girl's question had awakened something powerful, the desire to stop being lost. If this story touched your heart even a little, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindness Thread so more people can experience stories that remind us of the goodness still left in the world. Speech balloon special request: before you go, tell us in the comments, what moment of kindness changed your life? Alexander walked toward a new chapter that day, carrying with him the voice of a child who saw him not as a CEO, not as a powerful man, but simply as a human being, one who deserved to be found.
Liuch, no, pero mira lo que me hacen dibujar, hermano. Ustedes quieren que me haya la mierda.
¡Consti!
Te van a bajar el stream.
Por falta de eso.
Banderas en tu corazón. Cuando la noche es más oscura. En tu corazón.
Aguanta una canción de hombre.
Bum, 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 bum. Tarum, bum, bum. Por primera vez probarás más que puta vida.